This is dopamine, and this neurochemical in your brain will either destroy or give you back control of your life. You've probably heard of dopamine as the neurochemical of pleasure, but what most people don't know is that excessive dopamine from internet consumption damages the brain in ways that makes us lose control over ourselves. So we're going to cover how this seemingly harmless fun is rotting our brains, and more importantly, identify the strategies that will give us back control of our lives. And it starts by understanding that dopamine is what actually your brain uses to control your motivation and behavior. Think of dopamine as a roller coaster. After you experience a dopamine high like scrolling your phone, you feel an immediate crash. This is because dopamine gets used up to make you feel good. But because your dopamine is lower, instead of feeling pleasure, you now feel pain. A deep desire and craving to ride the roller coaster again so you can feel better. This feeling of craving is how your brain controls you to repeat rewarding behaviors, but this is also where the damage to our brains start. Because technology is infinitely available, we give into this craving and ride the roller coaster again. But this time, because our dopamine is much lower, we don't have as much fun. And instead, we feel a deeper crash and an even deeper craving to do it again. And so we do. We go again and again, thinking that we're having more fun, when in reality, we're depleting our dopamine by trying to get rid of this uncomfortable craving, which only makes the craving even worse. It's an endless cycle that turns seconds of craving into hours, hours into days, and days into months. So you might be thinking, it's just a bit of harmless fun, what's the big deal? But there's biological consequences for being in this state for too long. Firstly, this hyperstimulation leads to the decay of brain structures responsible for assessing risk and reward, meaning we lose the ability to consider long-term consequences and jump at anything that gives us immediate pleasure. This is why we can have huge life goals but give all that up for a few hours of scrolling our phone. Secondly, we experience a reduction of dopamine receptors in our brains. This occurs to protect us from overstimulation, but it means we are now less responsive to dopamine, and so we need even more stimulation to feel any sense of enjoyment. This unfortunately means we lose the ability to enjoy productive things like reading, studying, or building a business. And then thirdly comes the decay of brain structures that control our attention. We lose the ability to focus on one thing. So even when we do bring ourselves to work, we can't sit still and get it done. And in severe cases, this can lead to attention deficit disorder. But the most scary thing is when you take a step back and realize that desensitization, lack of control, and the endless pursuit of pleasure are all symptoms you'd see in a drug addict. And that's because it is. The internet affects our dopamine and brain structures in the same way as drugs. So just like how a drug addict can't stop throwing away their life, we can't stop throwing away our future for a bunch of 1-minute videos. So now we understand that there's real damage happening to our brains. So if we want to gain control of our lives, we need to figure out how to reverse it. And to do this, you might be thinking that dopamine is the problem, but we get dopamine from things like eating food, exercise, and having sex. The real answer is timing. See, those things that naturally give us dopamine, like eating, aren't things we can do endlessly. And so they naturally allow our dopamine receptors enough time to reset back to normal. But with the internet or any addictive substance, we can immediately keep going without allowing our dopamine receptors a chance to reset. This is why when drug addicts take a long break from drugs, we actually see a recovery in their dopaminergic activity. So the first step in regaining control is to take a break from any addictive things like social media, porn, video games, or alcohol. And this is to allow your brain to reset, aka do a dopamine detox. But the question is, how long does this detox need to be? Well, according to Dr. Anna Lemke, the author of Dopamine Nation, many severe cases of dopamine deficiency can require up to 4 weeks. And this is how long it took me. Realistically though, the time frame can range from days to weeks depending on how bad the addiction is. So the only way to know when your dopamine is back to normal is when you no longer have compulsive cravings, and doing productive things like reading becomes a lot easier. So I recommend starting with a 1-week break and extending it 1 week at a time until all your cravings disappear. But I have to warn you, taking a break from technology can be incredibly difficult because of all the cravings. So I've put together a free science-based dopamine detox protocol that explains how to immediately eliminate cravings, replace them with good habits, and reintroduce these things without losing control ever again. It's all for free in the description. But now, taking a break can be mentally challenging. So what if there was a way to speed up the process whilst also having fun? Well, our brains use something called neuroplasticity to heal brain structures, and we can make this happen in specific parts of the brain by purposely activating them. The great thing is that certain types of exercise have been shown to activate the same brain structures involved with addiction, whilst also causing the release of special neuromolecules that stimulate neuroplasticity. In combination, these factors mean exercise helps to reverse the damage caused by the internet. But it doesn't just stop there. Exercise also leads to the generation of dopamine. So not only does it replace some of the satisfaction we normally get from the internet, but it also helps to resensitize our dopamine receptors to enjoy normal productive things. And of course, it makes you look good as well. So try playing a sport that gives you the same rewards as using your phone. One where you can score goals, win games, and have fun. Do this and you'll feel like your normal self in no time. So now we know how to heal our brain, but this doesn't tackle the root problem. At some stage, we've all tried taking a break from technology, but end up falling back into our old habits. So how do we prevent ourselves from losing control again and actually change our lives this time? Well, there are 3 things we need to program into our brains so that we actually stick to productive behaviors. And the first has to do with the part of the brain that kicks us into action. See, if you think about a time where you put off doing your homework, I'm willing to bet that the night before it was due, you sprang into action and worked overtime. It's like whenever there's pressure, we instantly switch into the productive person that we want to be. That's because a key part of our brain's control system is the amygdala, and its job is to react to threats and avoid punishment. And so we're more likely to do productive things when we realize that there are immediate consequences of not doing so. The trouble is, in this modern world, there's no real threat that forces us to be athletic to survive or build businesses to live comfortably. So we need to create these threats for ourselves. And we can do this in 3 ways. The first is to surround yourself with hardworking people who have similar goals. We are competitive by nature, and when we see others making progress without us, we immediately feel like we're falling behind and jump into action. The second strategy is to raise awareness of what you'll miss out on in the next 2 years. Think about the big things you want to achieve in that time. Maybe you want to get into your dream university, get a 6-pack, or buy a new car. Then think about some immediate consequences of not achieving them. Perhaps you'll never get another shot at your dream uni, you won't be able to impress your dream girl, or perhaps you'll have to settle for a beaten up car. The third way is to commit yourself to something that has a real deadline and a real consequence if you don't take action. Maybe sign up for a competition, a test, or a course. Because it's only when there are immediate consequences that your brain starts motivating the right behaviors. But now, knowing the consequences aren't always enough to make us take action. Just like how a lot of us know that if we don't create our own income, then perhaps we'll be stuck at a 9-to-5 forever. But even with such huge consequences, we can still be really scared to take action. That's because as humans, we're not willing to commit a lot of effort to something that might fail, and rightfully so. On the flip side though, if you knew with 100% certainty that success would be guaranteed, and that all you had to do was work a few years, I'm willing to bet you wouldn't waste any time and get to work straight away. All of a sudden, things like scrolling our phone doesn't make any more sense. So, as described in the book The Magic of Thinking Big, it's only when we believe that our efforts are guaranteed to lead to success that we actually start taking action. But where does this level of belief come from? Well, it comes from eliminating the fear of failure. See, we tend to think that achieving any big goal is risky, that it's like a roll of the dice, when in reality, it's more like climbing a set of stairs. Every time you do something, you build your knowledge of how to do it correctly and bring yourself one step closer. And so if you spend enough time building that knowledge, you're guaranteed to make it to the top and know how to do it right. That's why research shows that people who become the best at something only become so by practicing more than anyone else. It's not because they have some type of natural gift. We're all born with no skills.
When people say artists are born with talent, you're not. You have to really learn and really practice. This is me playing guitar and singing.
So when you see that success is guaranteed as long as you learn how to do something correctly, you start to realize that you can do it as well. Because if someone else can learn to do it, why can't you? But now, even when we know we can do something like reading a book, sometimes it just feels too hard and we don't bother. So how do we prevent this from happening? Well, if you were asked to do something hard like walk a plank between 2 skyscrapers for $20, you might not do it. But if on the other side your family was in a burning room and you were the only one that could save them, you probably wouldn't hesitate. See, as humans, we can tolerate almost anything as long as our reason why is strong enough. So how do we find a meaningful why? Well, think far into the future about what you want your dream life to look like. How much freedom do you have? What have you ticked off your bucket list? How happy is your family? Paint a vision that gets you so excited just by thinking about it and that you'd happily give up everything for. For me, I make these videos because I want freedom. I want to look after my family, and I want to help people overcome these same motivational issues I've been through. These reasons are big enough for me to quit wasting my time and regain control of my life. So I know they're guaranteed to work for you too. But this leaves one big issue unresolved. Even though we can gain control ourselves, we might not have a clear idea of what we're passionate about, and so we can end up chasing goals which don't make us fulfilled. That's why gaining clarity on our purpose is the first thing we need. So if you want a science-backed way to finding your purpose, you can watch this video right here. Till then, you only live this life once. Make the most of it.